Education Scotland's guidelines for early reading are organised across three main areas. These are building a literacy-rich environment through interactions, experiences and spaces, developing skills for reading, and building independent and engaged readers. For each of these areas pictured, a suite of videos has been developed to support professional learning. Each area has been broken down into 4 themes. There is a video which explores each theme, identifying key messages and research which supports the guidance. This video is focused on the importance of oral language for reading, as underlined on the slide. You may choose to watch this video in isolation, but it is recommended that the overall suite of videos is used to support a broader programme of professional learning. The development of listening and talking underpins early reading progress. Within this video, we will explore these 3 key messages: the ongoing impact of children living in poverty and long-term effects of COVID on oral language development should be taken into account. Home language experiences should be valued and supported. Provide a physical and social environment to model, support and promote early listening and talking skills. We are going to start by considering how the development of listening and talking underpins early reading progress. Experience of hearing and saying sounds is how children begin to understand language and use it to communicate. This oral language development underpins children's ability to understand and create spoken text, laying the foundations for early reading. Realising the ambition tells us that the amount and quality of language that children are exposed to is crucial to their progress. The journey begins with noticing and listening to environmental sounds, words and conversations around them. We can respond to children's interests by providing rich opportunities for them to enjoy and explore spoken text. A broad range of language experiences where children have good role models and opportunities to communicate can help to secure the important skills of listening and attention. As part of their language development, children will notice the differences between a range of sounds. This is known as auditory discrimination and is an important step in learning to read. For example, hearing subtle differences in sounds help children to discriminate between and n or hat and ham when they are read aloud. Children's auditory memory is developed as they begin to hear, say and remember sounds and words. Oral language skills are developed as children hold the sounds or words in their memory. Remembering sound structures is key to being able to join sounds together to read words at a later stage. The Highland Council Emerging Literacy website has lots of practical suggestions to support auditory discrimination and memory. These include recommendations for a working memory-friendly environment, including adapting tasks and language to suit children's needs. All of these listening and talking skills are the first stepping stone to phonological awareness. Talking and listening are vital to developing vocabulary. Children bring a natural curiosity and inquiry to their play, which allows them to encounter new words as they explore the world around them. They can then link their experiences with the associated vocabulary and give it meaning. Learning and retaining words are more likely to happen after repeated encounters. The Victoria Department for Education offer a helpful definition of oral vocabulary, which is, oral vocabulary refers to words that children can understand or use while speaking and listening. Oral vocabulary is closely related to the reading vocabulary, which is the words that children can recognise and use in their reading and writing. Developing a good oral vocabulary is therefore an important aspect of learning to listen, talk and read. Building a wide and meaningful experience of spoken words can help children to know, understand and produce a broad vocabulary. As children start to read, this will help them to recognise words and use what they know to help them to make sense of text. This key message reminds us that the ongoing impact of children living in poverty and long-term effects of COVID on oral language development should be taken into account. The number of young children in Scotland experiencing speech, language and communication difficulties has increased since the COVID-19 pandemic, according to research by the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists and Early Years Scotland. In a 2022 survey of 245 early years practitioners across all 32 local authorities, 89% of those surveyed reported they'd seen an increase or significant increase in the number of the children with communication needs both within their setting and also the complexity of needs. When asked to provide further information about this, many commented on seeing more children in their settings with delayed speech and language development in a range of areas including interaction skills, understanding of language, verbal communication, vocabulary and speech sound difficulties. The main theme that emerged from responses was the link between increased numbers and complexity of children's communication needs and the COVID-19 pandemic, highlighting the impact of lockdown on children's communication and interaction skills. Now more than ever, it is crucial that educators work closely with families, health visitors and speech and language therapists to support children's oral language development. The high prevalence of early difficulties in language ability among disadvantaged children is one factor found to be driving the poverty-related attainment gap in Scotland. This was found in the 2019 report Changes in Language Ability over the Primary School Years, which draws upon the longitudinal Growing Up in Scotland, or GUS, dataset. This report finds that language ability during the early years has been recognised as important for later attainment and outcomes, and a considerable body of research has demonstrated that poor early language ability is associated with low educational attainment. At the same time, the GUS data suggests that although being from a disadvantaged social background increases the risks of poorer language skills, it does not equate to poorer language skills for all children from disadvantaged backgrounds and vice versa. There are positive steps that we can take to tackle this gap through the targeted use of oral language interventions, as found by the Education Endowment Foundation. This can support some disadvantaged children to catch up with their peers, particularly when this is provided one-to-one. It is therefore very important that we consider oral language from a broad equity perspective and understand the different strengths and abilities of all learners. This key message informs us that home language experience should be valued and supported. Children require adults who respond sensitively to their family culture and home language, and this is highlighted by realising the ambition. According to Bilingualism Matters, in Scotland, over 42,000 school children speak a language other than English at home, a total of 142 different languages. There are many ways of being bilingual. Some children don't use English at home. Some children use different languages with different family members. And some children can understand a language but not speak or write it. But all children are sensitive to attitudes about their languages. The quote on this slide from Naomi Flynn recognises the importance of maintaining children's first language for the dual purposes of supporting their self-esteem and ensuring that they have a secure grounding in their home language. It is important for children that both of their languages are valued and supported in our settings. This can help children to feel there is a strong connection with their heritage and community. Flynn explores the common misconception that children will be confused if they have to learn to read more than one language at a time. She recognises that they may take longer to assimilate both, but the long-term benefits of both cognitive development and the maintenance of identity and self-esteem will outweigh any early disadvantages that are experienced in settings that do not support bilingual development. Children will draw intuitively on their first language to help them understand the workings of their new language. As educators, this consideration also relates to how we engage with parents and carers. Parents may perceive that speaking to their children in their home language is detrimental to their learning in English. However, when parents speak their home language, they're able to communicate fluently and effectively, providing a good language role model. At the same time, children with English as an additional language will vary in the extent to which they can transfer their literacy skills and knowledge between languages. Brett Mortal emphasised the importance of providing vocabulary support, but recognised that learning new words in English not only creates linguistic demands on children, but also cultural demands, as culture and language are inseparable. In addition, the differing experience of children who speak different languages may influence their background knowledge that they bring to particular topics. Finally, children's dialect and accent are also an important consideration for educators. Research cited by Julia Snell and Richard Andrews highlights the dangers of negative attitudes towards different dialects, emphasising that it's not the dialect in and of itself that interferes with reading, but rather the rejection of children's own dialect that leads to problems. Accounting for dialect and accent is also important when supporting decoding skills through phonics. Moll and Diaz highlight the dangers of making assumptions about children's decoding skills based around correct pronunciation, as children are likely to have an accent influenced by their home language. When thinking specifically of Scots, it's useful to consider the research of Michael Dempster, who explores how the sounds we make as speakers impacts on our phonemic system. He highlights some key differences between how phonics programs might present particular sounds and how children are likely to pronounce words in their everyday lives. It's important to consider how any phonics program aligns with the spoken language of children in your setting. The Scottish Book Trust has collected a range of guidance and suggestions for parents and carers with English as an additional language, as well as a selection of resources for both Gaelic and Scots language. The Bilingualism Matters website also offers lots of practical support. This key message encourages us to consider how we can provide a physical and social environment to model, support and promote early listening and talking skills. We will start by considering interactions. Role modelling language during interactions is very important to develop oral language skills. According to the Education Endowment Foundation, there is evidence that the rate at which children develop language is sensitive to the amount of input they receive from the adults and peers around them, and that the quality of this input is likely to be more important than the quantity. The quality of conversation that children have with their peers and adults is therefore very important. Skillful educators tailor their support to meet the needs of individual children. The Education Endowment Foundation suggests that adults should comment on what the child is interested in or doing, echoing back what they say with new vocabulary added. Children can share their ideas with modelling and support from the educator using sensitive questioning that invites them to elaborate. Weitzman and Greenberg give some practical suggestions, including the Strive for 5 approach, which involves keeping a conversation going back and forth at least 5 times. Educators are encouraged to follow the child's lead with interactions occurring naturally from their interests. They also suggest the OWL approach, where educators are encouraged to observe, wait and listen. This gives young children valuable thinking time and encourages more conversation as adults are seen to be actively listening and adapting their responses. During interactions, it is important for educators to get down to the child's level and reduce the load for them by keeping instructions simple. The Oracy education charity Voice 21 have produced some teacher talk tactics for early language development, which may be useful to consider ways to further support and challenge children as their oral language skills have become more developed. Links to support these suggestions can be found in the signposting section at the end of the video. Now we will take a little bit of time to consider the spaces which we provide to support listening and talking. The Speech and Language UK charity, which supports children with speech, language and communication, stress the importance of a communication supportive environment where spaces are carefully planned to support children's oral language development. We can begin to think about what this looks like in practice by considering your setting from a child's point of view. Are different spaces provided for children to talk and listen for a variety of purposes? Are there social spaces which encourage children to think and talk together? We can also think about how we use seating areas to support listening skills. Young children may find it easier to listen if they have comfortable seating and quieter space around them to participate in conversations or listen to stories without distractions. It is also important to carefully consider children's stage of development in relation to the length of time we expect them to sit and listen. We can provide opportunities to support children's oral language development both indoors and out. Listening to sounds in different spaces is important as they begin to discriminate, recognise and recall what they hear. Encouraging children to explore their senses in their natural environment can help to develop these key skills. For example, recognising sounds in the outdoor environment can improve auditory discrimination. There are also rich opportunities for children to develop oral vocabulary through inquiry and exploration in outdoor spaces. We can also plan spaces for children to explore sounds through the engagement with loose parts, musical instruments, and digital technology. Finally, we will consider the experiences which we can provide to support listening and talking. Play experiences are the natural vehicle for children to develop oral language. Realising the ambition emphasises that knowledge of child development underpins effective practice and will enable us to recognise that young children learn through play with responsive adults who plan experiences which extend learning and understanding. It is important that educators take time to observe and consider children's progress in listening and talking as a starting point. We can follow the child's lead, making the most of opportunities to develop listening skills as we respond to invitations to join their play. These experiences allow us to show children how we share their enjoyment, encouraging their ability to focus their attention and talk about things that matter to them. These opportunities can be used to model language and extend vocabulary in meaningful ways, building the experiences for children to draw upon as they learn to read. A video overview, glossary, signposted resources, and some reflective questions have been created to accompany this video. You can use the QR code on the screen to access these.